Thank you, Dr. Arboleda, for the very generous introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm here to share with you the last lecture that I have prepared, for the lecture series, of the Center for Philippine Studies and the Department of Indo-Pacific Languages and Literatures. Uh, the first lecture that I had was actually an introduction to how diverse the southern Philippines is, where I came from, and this is supposed to be the second lecture, but because of some technical difficulties yesterday, we had it uh, 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 delivered. We had this delivered today. So it's entitled Nationalized Symbols of Injustices, Contemporary Sources of Bangsamoro Grievances. For those who are not familiar with the Bangsamoro, this is an emerging identity in the southern Philippines that is being embraced by the Islamized ethnic groups in the southern Philippines. The Philippines used to, to boast that it's the only Christian country in Asia. But a significant portion of our population in the south is actually Muslim. Okay? And because of that, um, they feel that they deserve uh, they deserve space, in the national community. They feel that they had to assert this space because they feel marginalized, they feel sidelined, no? And in fact, there are grievances that the Muslims or the Bangsamoro of the Philippine South um, think that these are legitimate grievances, but the majority of the Filipino population uh, couldn't understand. And that's the reason why I'm preparing this paper for us to understand a bit of why would the Bangsamoro uh, resist the mainstream culture, of the Philippines. When I was a new student of history, I couldn't understand why a Muslim would say, I am not Filipino. And this is also true, by the way, for the indigenous groups that we had in the Philippine South. No? Some of them feel that they are not Filipinos. No? And why can't they feel they're Filipinos? Is because of these grievances. So I'm trying to explain what these grievances are. Okay. So, says, is this, it's not functioning. Okay, there, thank you. Well, let me provide you the context first, of the, the, the paper. As I've said, many Filipinos could not understand the Bangsamoro aspiration to self-determination. The resistance of the Bangsamoro to assimilate with the mainstream Filipinos um, is actually manifested, in the idea of self-determination. No? I'm resisting because I have a different identity from you. I cannot accept, or I cannot embrace, I cannot be like you because I have my own self-determination. That's one. And many Filipinos could not understand that. There is also Republic Act 10908. This is a law that mandates all educational institutions in the Philippines, from the basic up to higher education, to integrate the history of the Filipino Muslims and indigenous peoples in the teaching of Philippine history. But it cannot be implemented well because many of our educational institutions in Visayas and even in Luzon uh, do not even have the the capacity, do not even have the expertise, do not even have the materials. No? So you see the compounding effects of these ones. No? Where we want to understand the Bangsamoro people, but there is no one available to explain things to the mainstream Filipinos. Okay? And there is little space left to discuss about Bangsamoro, and this space is left in the hands of popular media. So, right after the bombing, by the way, if you do not know, I used to teach in Mindanao State University in Marawi City. That's the only Islamic city in the Philippines. And there is Mindanao State University there, a huge university. We have 15,000 students, by the way. And a bomb exploded inside the university, killing several people and wounding several others. And if you look at social media, people started, posting hateful comments against the Muslims. No? And before, you have the newspapers even using the qualifier Muslim to describe a terrorist, like a Muslim terrorist. No? But again, we know that a Muslim is somebody who is supposed to be fearful of God, who is nice to his neighbors, etc., etc. Things got muddled up, because of this, hateful comments and very limited understanding of what was going on. Anyway, so this is the context, and this is the reason why I have to explain this. No? Why are the grievances difficult to eradicate? Well, if you were around during my first lecture, you would understand why it's difficult, because it did not just pop out of nowhere. It is rooted actually in the earlier periods of our history. I remember, Dr. Arboleda, that during the Spanish period, the Moros were like, the Moro was given a very negative meaning, like a kidnapper, a pirate, and during the American period, they categorized the people in Mindanao as civilized and uncivilized. The civilized refers to the Christianized groups, and the uncivilized refers to the non-Christians. And the non-Christians, of course, included the indigenous peoples of the southern Philippines and that of the Moros. So, so this is one grievance, that is rooted in history. I remember one American general who was assigned to Mindanao to subjugate the Moros, who said, a good Moro is a dead Moro. Okay. The Moro, by the way, refers to, this is another term for the Filipino Muslims in the South. Okay. These grievances persist in contemporary times. I will provide more details, why. Irritating Bangsamoro sensitivities and opening up old wounds that are supposed to have healed already after several decades, or even a century. Okay. Before we proceed to the grievances, okay, let us revisit first the idea of a nation, because the Philippines envisions itself to be a nation, the Filipino nation, Filipino nation. We refer to the dictionary meaning of the nation. You have here population with a certain sense of itself, a cohesiveness, a commonality of attitudes and ideals, and often but not always a common language. According to another author, for artificially created nations like the Philippines, because before we became the Republic of the Philippines, we were composed of several groups of people who feel they are independent from one another, autonomous from one another, unrelated to one another. And so, he said, for artificially created nations, the remedy is nation building. So you have to build the sense of belongingness among those people who felt they did not constitute one nation. So nation building is the process whereby a society of people with diverse origins, histories, languages, cultures, and religions come together within the boundaries of a sovereign state with a unified constitutional and legal dispensation, a national public education system, an integrated national economy, shared symbols and values. We will talk about this more later. Shared symbols and values as equals to work towards eradicating the divisions and injustices of the past, to foster unity and promote a countrywide consciousness of belonging to one community. This is how, a nation is defined, no? Or nation building rather, no, is defined. And yesterday I think I mentioned that while the universities in the big cities like in Manila, De La Salle University, Ateneo, UP are already talking about postmodern or post-postmodern, whatever paradigms and frameworks there, no? Our universities in the South are still talking about nation building. To very advanced countries, no? Nation building is already an outdated concept, an outdated, approach, no, to national unity. But in the Philippine South, I think nation building remains very relevant because you still have people there who says we are not Filipinos. In 2007, by the way, I attended the first teachers training on the teaching of Mindanao history. And the first speaker was a Muslim. And because at that time I was having this nationalist framework, Dr. Kompok, I got scandalized when he yelled in that conference that I am not a Filipino. We are not Filipinos. No, we are Bangsamoro. And then the next speaker was a Subanen Timuay, a Subanen traditional leader. Subanen, by the way, is another ethnic group, but they're not Muslims. No? They're indigenous peoples. And he also yelled, I am not also a Filipino, but I am not Bangsamoro. And so, having a nationalist framework would really scandalize you, hearing these, comments from the speakers. And at that time, I did not understand where they are coming from. In Filipino, we have the expression, hindi natin alam kung ano ang hugot niya. The word hugot, where you are anchoring your feelings, your sentiments, the anchorage of your feelings. That's the closest translation probably of hugot, no? Anyway, no. So nation building remains relevant in the Philippine South. And we have, what's this? The national government promoting national symbols, no? Because this is part of nation building, no? Shared symbols and values. And now let us try to evaluate the national symbols chosen by the state, if indeed it is going to promote the feeling of belongingness among the people. Okay. Number one is the national flag. Okay. The national flag is supposed to unite our people. It's supposed to be an image where you see yourself, right? Like if you consider yourself an American, you see the American flag, that is my flag because I see myself there. No? The 50th state is that little star there, Hawaii. Of course, Kim probably would have a very good argument about it. But anyway, so where is the representation of the Muslims there? Okay. The government would say the three stars represent the three geographic areas of the Philippines: Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. And the 8 rays of the sun refers to the first 8 provinces in Luzon, mostly Tagalog provinces, that first resisted the Spanish colonial regime. And the Muslims were saying, like, we did not resist only in the 19th century. We resisted right at the beginning of the Spanish occupation of the Philippines. What we are not represented in the rays of the sun. And that huge amount of time where we fought the Spaniards is just relegated to this little star or wherever corner of the triangle, that huge contribution to history is. And that's the reason why they say some academics from our university will say the Philippine flag should be revised so that, it's not only the Muslim struggle against the Spanish colonialism can be represented in the national emblem. What about the Lumads, for example? The Lumads, by the way, the collective name of the indigenous peoples in the southern Philippines. No? And what about Cordillera, for example? They also fought the Spaniards. They also fought the Americans, the American colonizers, I mean. So these are the critiques. No? And to some of the Muslims, and especially those who are members of the liberation fronts, no, like the MNLF and the MILF, the Moro Islamic Liberation Front and the Moro National Liberation Front, the two big, groups of Muslim secessionist movements, no. We're saying that we don't feel that we are represented. The Muslims are represented in this national flag. So instead of promoting unity, the flag has become a source of grievance on the part of the Muslims. And then you have here the national house. Okay. This is the Bahay Kubo. Now, if you're taking, I do not know in the culture classes they introduce the Bahay Kubo or no. Mm-mm. But anyway, in my elementary days, I always remember that every classroom in elementary has all these national symbols. What's the national fish? It's bangus. And people in the south do not like bangus. Bangus is milkfish because it's so bony. And then the Maranaos would prefer tilapia over bangus. They wouldn't say, this is our national fish. Probably they'll say tilapia is the national fish. So the national house, by the way, is being promoted as, the national residence of every Filipino. Okay. It's very organic. It's environmentally friendly. Yeah, that's true. But the Muslims are asking, why this when we have more sophisticated buildings like this? This is a turugan of the Maranaos. The foundations of these are huge trunks, no? And the ukir, the carvings are very intricate, okay, and very sturdy as well. Okay, why choose this over this? This is very common in the Christianized areas, okay, but this one is prevalent in the Maranao areas. Maranao, by the way, there are 13 Islamized tribes in the Philippines. No? The Maranao is one of them. No? So this is a trademark of Maranao culture, trademark of Maranao architecture. And of course, there is another Islamized group in the southern Philippines. They call themselves Tausug, and they are dominant in the Sulu archipelago. Okay, and the Tausug has the Astana, which is the residence of the Sultan of Sulu. But why this? No? So that's the question. That's the question. So instead of what's this? Seeing themselves in the national symbols, okay, despite the magnificence, despite the beauty, despite the sophistication, they feel that they are being sidelined. No, 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 no. You cannot be the national symbol because we have this as the national symbol. No? So instead of promoting the feeling of belongingness, a sense of identification, it has become a source of grievance. Yeah, this is an example of the posters. No, yeah, the national fruit is mango. The national animal is the carabao. The national costume is Barong Tagalog and Barot Saya, and so on and so forth. Now, let's go to the national food of the Philippines. This is supposed to unite.
Sorry,
no?
excuse me.
Yep.
Does it still say bakya? Is it the bakya?
I think so.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay.
These are posters being displayed in conspicuous areas. But yeah, probably a decade ago, these are but we have already informed the Department of Education. We have already informed the Office of the Presidential Advisor on the Peace Process. And our discussion here is moot and academic. No? I think DepEd is doing something already to address these problems. But again, as I've said, this is moot and academic. The impact of these national symbols could be long-term because, it has already reached the rhetoric of the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, the Moro National Liberation Front, and the resistance movement. The national food says lechon. It's okay if it's lechon manok or lechon kambing, but it's not lechon kambing or manok. It's really lechon baboy. And the Muslims thought this is very offensive. We don't eat pork. And everybody else, apart from the Muslims who do not eat pork, like the Seventh-day Adventists, because in the Philippines we have a huge sector of Seventh-day Adventist adherents, and of course you have those who have hypertension, arthritis, who are prevented. No, I was just kidding. No, this is an exaggeration, but again, you see now the problem that chosen national symbols, could pose to people. No, instead of uniting people, it would be dividing people. No? So the national symbol has to be, scrutinized and really, discerned well. Otherwise, you will not achieve your purpose. Okay? National Heritage Site. There is an agency in the Philippines called the National Historical Commission of the Philippines, and it is this agency that is charged with declaring national heritage sites. And we say heritage sites, okay, these are sources of pride for all Filipinos. Let's examine them. Of the more than 1,500 nationally declared heritage sites, 13 are only found in the BARM. The BARM is the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao. This is the autonomous region that is comprised of the predominantly Muslim provinces in the southern Philippines. Only 13 of the 1,500. If you are going to get the percentage of that, it's not even 1%. And of the nationally declared heritage sites in that area, that used to be part of the Old Moro province. The Old Moro province is actually composed of 5 districts, like Davao, but Davao is it has become predominantly Christian now. And then Cotabato, which is, of course, composed of several provinces now, but some of these provinces have become Christian, predominantly Christian. Lanao, for example, it was divided into two. The southern part is predominantly Muslim, but the northern part is predominantly Christian. Zamboanga used to be... The reason why it was called Moro province is because at that time when it was organized in 1903 by the American colonial regime, the majority of the population in those districts were actually Moros or Muslims. But you go to the next and succeeding decades, the demographics would eventually change. No. Anyway, let's look at the nationally declared heritage sites. Cotabato, which is actually the capital of the autonomous region now, you have here the heritage site of the Immaculate Conception Church. This is Bangsamoro territory, but the heritage site is Immaculate Conception Church. There are also Christians in Cotabato, by the way. The Notre Dame Archdiocesan Seminary, the Spanish Fortification in Piquid, the General Paulino Santos Shrine. I think General Paulino Santos is like the equivalent of Dole here in Hawaii. And then, he was the one who colonized and established colonies there in the Sarangani area, South Cotabato area, in southern Mindanao. And then the puok na pinaglibigan ng 17 martir ng Coronadal. I think these are the 17 martyrs who were martyred during the Japanese occupation of Mindanao. And the last, and I wouldn't say definitely not the least, the shrine of Sultan Kudarat. Sultan Kudarat, by the way, was the first Sultan of Maguindanao who earned the respect of the Spanish colonizers, so that the Spaniards, agreed to sign a treaty with him. And he established peace, and consolidated his, the different tribes in central Mindanao during his time. And you know where the shrine of Sultan Kudarat used to be located? It was located at an obscure part of the public plaza of Cotabato City, behind a huge tree. That's so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Only 1 out of 6 represents the Sultan Kudarat.
Jose Rizal, the national hero, doesn't he have a statue in Cotabato City?
He has a statue, sir, but we're talking about the nationally declared heritage sites. Zamboanga, another district of the Old Moro province, has the Bahay Pamahalaan ng Zamboanga. This is the City Hall of Zamboanga, the Bank of the Philippine Islands of Zamboanga, the oldest bank in the Philippines. Cesar Cortes Climaco is one of the most prominent mayors of the city. Vicente Alvarez, another a local hero. Fort Pilar, the fort established by the Spaniards in Zamboanga, and there is only one representing the Moros, the Taloksungay Mosque. Of the 6, there is only one representing the Moros. These are the Davao. We have Davao Penal Colony, Port Santa Ana, Davao City Hall, and Ota Kyosabaro. Ota Kyosabaro, I think, is a Japanese entrepreneur who went to establish plantations in Davao area. No? And then you have Lanao, the Turugan in Marantao and Turugan at least. No? And then Makaraig Makapagal House. This is the ancestral house of one of the presidents of the Philippines, no? Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. So these are the nationally declared heritage sites of NHCP. I said 13, do not be confused, ha? Zamboanga is outside ARMM, but it used to be part of the so-called Moro province. Because you might be counting 13 and then 6 plus 6 plus 4 plus 2. No. Not all of Lanao is part of the ARMM. When you say Lanao, you have Lanao del Sur, that's part of ARMM, and Lanao del Norte, that's part of Northern Mindanao. Okay? Davao, you have Davao del Sur, Davao Oriental, Davao del Norte, and Davao de Oro. And now they have Davao Occidental. No? So it's now several provinces. No? And some of these provinces have become predominantly Christian. No? Zamboanga as well, you have Zamboanga del Norte, Zamboanga del Sur, and Zamboanga Sibugay. No? So do not be confused that you said 13 only in the Barm plus the adjacent areas that used to be part of the Moro province. That's what I'm saying. No? Okay, let's talk about Philippine history. Okay? History is supposed to be something like a shared story that when you read, you also see yourself there, right? And if you see yourself there, you'd say, this is indeed our history because I can see our people there. But look at our history textbooks. These are the major textbooks that are used in Philippine history classrooms, no? Both in the basic and in higher education institutions. No? This one is the most popular, History of the Filipino People by Chodoro Agoncillo. I do not know if some of you use that here. Out of the 684 pages, there are only 9 that mentions about the Muslims or the Moros. This is Renato Constantino's 2-volume The Philippines, no? 47 pages out of 471. But the sequel of the first volume was 0. Okay. Philippine History and Government, Gregorius ID, 319 pages, but there are only 6 that talked about the Muslims. 288 pages, but this one only talked about 23. And 413, there's only 34. How can the Muslims say this is indeed our history because you are even barely mentioned in the pages of the so-called Philippine history? No? So, yeah, we computed and that's it. No? 1%, 3%. Constantino had the highest, no? 10%. But, you just even imagine the 333 years that was spent fighting or resisting Spanish colonialism, and you say you only had 10% of your contribution to the making of the Filipino nation. That's gonna be creating a huge grievance on the part of those who contributed more than 300 years of resistance. No? Other social irritants, again, like the media would, have these caricatures, no? Especially after 9/11, and then of course you have these policies, no? And okay, though this is not in the Philippines, but there is an unwritten rule among Muslims, no? Who go to Metro Manila. They usually remove their scarves when they take a cab. Otherwise, especially in Manila, that many taxi drivers are they do not follow the rules, and they would not take you as a passenger. if you are, identified as a Muslim. So, you know, even if it's against their will, they would remove their scarves. So this is another source of grievance for them. No? Now, we go back to the concept of nation, Filipino nation, no? And we always have the idea of nation as like an ideal family, no? It should be united, it should be cohesive. A nation must ensure the well-being and development of all its members so that everybody becomes an asset, becomes empowered, and capacitated to enhance the greatness of that particular nation. And therefore, it is crucial that efforts at nation building are aimed at making every person feel that he or she is part of that family. But if you are having national symbols that would alienate other groups of Filipinos, how can you expect them to feel that they are part of the Filipino family, part of the Filipino nation? No? And therefore, we were calling on the Philippine state to ensure that its chosen national symbols, national heritage sites, the national historical narrative are inclusive of all Filipinos, including the Bangsamoro and the indigenous peoples. So I think that ends my presentation, and now I'm ready to answer your questions. Thank you so much.